The poem for today is dedicated for a refuah shlema for Chana Gittel Bas Brindel, and the poem is perhaps apposite because we have a custom, a minhag, to say Tehillim on behalf of a sick person, and we are reading a poem by Harvey Shapiro named simply Psalm. I am still on a rooftop in Brooklyn on your holy day. The harbor is before me, Governor's Island, the Verrazano Bridge, and the Narrows. I keep in my head what Rabbi Nachman said about the world being a narrow bridge, and that the important thing is not to be afraid. So on this day, I bless my mother and father, that they be not fearful where they wander. And I ask you to bless them. And before you close your book of your life, your Sefer Hachayim, remember that I always praised your world and your splendor, and that my tongue tried to say your name on Court Street in Brooklyn. Take me safely through the Narrows to the sea. Take me safely through the Narrows to the sea. I repeated that last line to emphasize for those who don't know that the Narrows, which appears in line 4 and in line 15, refer to the specific entry, if you will, to New York Harbor. And there is a bridge spanning the Narrows, the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. I don't know if it's still the longest bridge of its sort in the world. At one time it was. It connects the borough of Brooklyn with Staten Island. And Harvey Shapiro lived in Brooklyn Heights, and he's on this rooftop, and it's on God's holy day. Of course, it's clear in the poem that the holy day is none other than Yom Kippur. He's not in shul, he's not in synagogue, but he's on the rooftop. And he refers to various aspects of Yom Kippur. He refers to the Sefer Hachayim, the book of life. He refers to the practice of Yizkor, of remembering the departed, in this case, his mother and father, and also asks that God remember him. At this point, let's go and parse certain things that are entirely dependent upon translations. And to ask the question, what is a psalm? What does that mean to us? It's a book of Psalms. And this is Harvey Shapiro's psalm. Well, if you look in a dictionary, you'll find that psalm is a song which is sung, and it's sung along usually with a musical instrument, specifically perhaps a harp or a lyre. And okay, it's a song. Well, in Hebrew, a song can mean both a poem and a melody. And of course, poetry is always sung. So those of you who have seen Dead Poet Society, that's the scene, the scene of the York scene. And in Hebrew, though, although we speak of Shirei David, the poems, the songs of King David, the name of the book and the names of these are Tehillim. And Tehillim means praises. Tehillah David, a song of praise that David has composed, has written. So there is, right in the title, something that is about praise. And praise, of course, will appear at the end when the poet prays to God that he has spoken his praise. And it is, after all, the day of judgment. And the poet says, yes, I'm not in shul now, but the whole year I have spoken your praise and your glory, your splendor. And where has he spoken? He tried to say your name on Court Street. Court Street is actually a street in Brooklyn Heights, and there's a big court on the street. That's where it gets its name. So let us continue looking at this poem, and having identified the meaning of psalm, it's about praise, and having identified the holy day and the meaning of that holy day and the meaning of what's not happening on this holy day in Harvey Shapiro's life, he describes what he's looking at. The harbor is before me, Governor's Island, the Verrazano Bridge, and the Narrows. Oh, Narrows. That reminds him of a passage in Rabbi Nachman, who said that the whole world was a narrow bridge and that the important thing is not to be afraid. So let's get back to the issue of translation. Now this little comment by Rabbi Nachman is part of a larger teaching. It's found in the second volume of his teachings, Likutei Moharan, number 48, but it's become famous, this aspect. And it's become so famous that I remember in Israel there was a team, a basketball team, Maccabi Tel Aviv always wins, but this basketball team won that year. It was the champion, Galil Elyon. Of all places, the Galil was the best basketball team in Israel that year. And its fans were absolutely delirious about their team. And when things were tough in the game, the fans began to sing. And the song they sang is from Rabbi Nachman. And the song is the tune, I'll sing it, Kol Olam Kulo Gesher Tzar Miyod, Gesher Tzar Miyod, Gesher Tzar Miyod, Kol Olam Kulo Gesher Tzar Miyod, Gesher Tzar Miyod. V'haikor Lo lefached klal, v'haikor lo lefached klal. Beautiful song, and they would sing it. Things are tough in the ball game, but don't be afraid. That's the important thing. We can pull it off. We can win. We can overcome. Yafeh, very, very, very nice, and a very Israeli story. Unfortunately, that is not exactly what Rabbi Nachman says. What Rabbi Nachman says is, I'll read it. Rabbi Nachman says, V'da she'adam tzarich lavor al gesher tzar me'od, me'od. Man has to cross all human beings have to cross a very, very narrow bridge. V'haklal v'ha'ikar. And the rule and the essence is, shelo yitpached klal, that man not be afraid. What am I? What is the difference? The difference is a grammatical point. Lo lefached klal could be translated as not to fear. That's what it means. Lo yitpached is the reflexive form of the Hebrew verb, just like lihit labesh means to dress oneself, lihit rachetz means to wash oneself, yitpached means don't make yourself afraid. Don't make yourself live in despair. Shelo yitpached klal. Shelo yitpached klal. It's what we do to ourselves. And that is the important thing. That is the important thing. And this brings us to how important translation is. And we come to the what I believe is the poem, which is the background of Harvey Shapiro's poem. And everybody is familiar with this poem, who has ever been davened actually on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's the great poem Unatanet Tokef Kedushat Hayom Kihu Norav Hayom. And in this poem, which speaks about the majesty and power of this day, the poet speaks, Uva shofar gadol yitaka, a great shofar will be blown. And one would imagine that the sound of that would shake the foundations of the earth. But instead, the kol demama daka yishama, the chazanim used to blast it out. Uva shofar gadol yitaka. I'm not a chazan. The kol demama daka yishama. And a kol demama daka. Now, what is kol demama daka yishama? What is that? So I've looked up several translations. The translation of Art Scroll is a still, thin sound. What is a thin sound? What is a still? Okay, still isn't bad, right? The KJ, King James Version, has what is a magisterial translation. It's wrong, but it's magisterial. It's beautiful. A still small voice. Well, a voice is not still. What does it say? Now, the third translation that I grew up with was that of the Birnbaum translation of the Machzor, a gentle whisper. Also beautiful, but it's not. Now, where does this appear? Where is this phrase from? So the poet drew this, of course, from chapter 19 in the book of Kings in Melachim, when Eliyahu seeks to escape from the people and goes to Har Chorev, and God says, "Why are you here?" And Eliyahu answers, and God doesn't accept any of the answers. And then a great thunder, earthquake, wind, fire, and God is not in the fire, and He's not in the earthquake, and He's not in the great wind. And then there is a kol demama daka, a kol demama daka, a sound that it is silent, a silent sound, popularized later in the sounds of silence. I don't know, but it's what is the sound of silence? What is the sound of silence? But that's the sound that you have to hear, and that's the translation, right? And perhaps this is echoing from the beginning line of the poem. Let's go back to the beginning line of the poem, of Shapiro's poem. I am still on a rooftop. Well, still means, what were you doing before? What is this? We don't know anything. Maybe he is still. He's not saying anything. He is silent, responding to the sound of God's silence. And he was, in that case, communing with God. I am still on a rooftop. But during the year, it is different. I always praised your world, and your splendor, and that my tongue tried to say your name on Court Street in Brooklyn. Of course, this could also mean that I am still on a rooftop. I'm still, all year long, I was trying to say your name, and I'm still trying to say your name today. But maybe it's a double entendre. I am still trying to say your name, as I have the whole year, but now I am saying it in a still way. And I ask you to bless my mother and father, right? And I ask you to bless them. This, of course, is Yom Kippur. It's Yizkar, which we say in Yom Kippur. And before you close your book of life, your Sefer Hachayim, and of course this takes us back to remember me, but it takes us back to Nisan Tokef. And if we want to remember something that's been popularized, I mentioned Simon and the Sounds of Silence. So one could refer here to Leonard Cohen, who takes from this poem, right, the poem in which the point in the poem in which we say that there is a book of life, and we ask to be remembered in that book of life. Remember, right? And some in fire, some in water. And we ask to be remembered, some in sunshine, some in nighttime. That's the poem of the Tanatokef. So remember, God, that I always praised your word and your splendor, and that my tongue, I said Tehillim, I said my Tehillim, I said my psalm, tried to say your name on Court Street in Brooklyn. Take me safely through the narrows to the sea. The world is a narrows. It is a Gesher Tsar Miod. I'm reminded of Rabbi Nachman, and he courses through my head on this holy day, on this rooftop in Brooklyn, once again, trying to say your name in silence, your name in holiness. And all of this, once again, should be Bizchut Chanegittel Bas Braino, L'Refuah Shlema.